He already said goodbye, and no one stopped him. Not the wind brushing across the training field, not the boots lined in perfect rows, not even the 47 German shepherds sitting in absolute stillness behind him, each one trained to obey, each one watching without moving as Daniel Carter walked toward the gate for the last time, his duffel bag slung low over his shoulder. The weight of it nothing compared to the silence pressing against his back. The early morning air carried that familiar scent of dust and steel and faint motor oil, the kind that never really leaves a place like this, and neither did the memories, years of commands, of quiet bonds built between man and dog, of trust earned inch by inch, not spoken but understood, and now it all ended with a single order that still echoed in his mind. You're no longer authorized to stay. Simple words, clean and final, the kind that didn't leave room for argument. Daniel didn't look back because he knew what he would see. Discipline, perfection, obedience, 47 dogs holding position as they were trained to do, no matter who walked away, no matter what it cost. And that was the point. That had always been the point. But something shifted in the air behind him, something small, almost too quiet to notice, a single movement breaking through a wall of stillness, a soft crunch of gravel that didn't belong. Daniel slowed, just slightly. Not enough for anyone else to notice, but enough for the moment to stretch, for the silence to fracture. Then came the voice, sharp, controlled, cutting through the morning, call that dog back. It wasn't panic, not yet, but it carried weight, authority, expectation. Daniel closed his eyes for half a second because he already knew which one it was. There are bonds you build through repetition, through commands and drills and routine, and then there are bonds that form in the spaces between, in the quiet moments no one else sees, and those are the ones that don't listen. To orders, he turned slowly now, boots grinding against the gravel, and there it was, Rex, a full-grown German shepherd with a dark sable coat catching the pale sunlight, ears forward, eyes locked not on the officers, not on the line he was never meant to cross, but on Daniel, steady, certain. As if the decision had already been made long before this moment ever came. Stay, someone barked again, firmer this time, the words snapping through the air like a line drawn in concrete. Rex paused, just for a breath, muscles tight, body balanced between two worlds, one built on command, the other on something deeper, something older. Daniel felt it in his chest, that pull, that quiet, stubborn refusal that couldn't be trained out or disciplined away. He shook his head once, barely, a silent plea more than an order. Don't do this. Not for me. Not like this. But Rex took another step, slow, deliberate, crossing the painted boundary that every dog on that field knew better than to touch. 47 remained behind, unmoving, perfect in their obedience, and in that contrast, something invisible became undeniable. Daniel exhaled, long and heavy, the kind of breath that carried years inside it. Because he understood now, this wasn't defiance, it wasn't confusion, it was choice, and choice always comes with a cost. The wind shifted again, carrying the faint jingle of a dog tag somewhere in the distance. And for the first time since the order was given, Daniel Carter didn't feel like he was walking away alone. The command did not come again, and that silence was heavier than any shout, stretching across the training yard like something no one wanted to touch. Rex stood just past the painted line now, his paws resting on gravel that had never belonged to him before, and still he did not look away, his amber eyes fixed on Daniel with a steadiness that felt almost human, as if he understood the weight of what he had done and had already accepted it. Daniel felt his throat tighten, but his face stayed still, years of discipline holding him together even as something deeper began to shift beneath it. This was not how it was supposed to go, not for either of them. He had trained these dogs to respond to tone, to gesture, to the smallest shift in breath. He had taught them that hesitation could cost everything, that obedience was survival. And yet here stood the one who chose differently, the one who listened to something that had no command word, no whistle, no signal, just memory. Daniel took a step forward again, slow, testing the moment, and Rex followed, matching him. Without hesitation, the sound of gravel under four paws now unmistakable in the open air. Behind them the 47 remained in perfect formation, their bodies still, their eyes alert, watching but unmoving. It was not indifference. Daniel knew that. It was training, It was loyalty of a different kind, loyalty to structure, to expectation, to the system that shaped them. And there was honor in that too. But this was something else entirely, something that could not be measured or graded or approved. A handler's voice finally broke through from the line, lower now, uncertain, as if the script had been lost somewhere between command and consequence. Daniel Carter, give the order, make him return. It would have been simple, one word, one familiar tone, and Rex would have turned. He knew that. They both did, because that was how it worked. That was how it had always worked. Daniel stopped walking. The gate still a few yards ahead, the metal frame catching the pale light of morning. Beyond it lay a road that did not belong to the base, a life that had no place for routines like this, no place for rows of dogs waiting for direction, just open space and quiet decisions. He turned fully now, facing Rex, really looking at him for the first time since the line had been crossed. The dog's chest rose and fell steady, calm. No fear, no confusion, just presence. Daniel's hand lifted slightly, not enough to signal, just enough to feel the air between them. You should not be here, he said softly, the words barely carrying past a few feet. Rex's ears flicked at the sound of his voice, but he did not move back, did not shift his weight. He simply stood, as if the answer had already been given without needing to be spoken. Daniel felt a memory surface, uninvited but clear, a cold night months ago when Rex had refused to leave his side during a long watch. No command had been given then either, no instruction to stay, and yet he had remained, not out of duty, but out of something quieter, something that did not ask permission. Daniel let out a slow breath, his eyes drifting for a moment toward the line of dogs behind. 47 pairs of eyes still locked forward, still waiting, still perfect, then back to Rex, imperfect. Now by every measurable standard, and yet somehow more certain than all the rest. The wind moved through the yard again, lifting a faint edge of dust, carrying with it the low, almost inaudible jingle of Rex's tag, a small sound, but enough to fill the space between them. Daniel's hand lowered, and with it, something inside him settled, not a decision made, but a truth acknowledged, the kind that does not need approval. He turned once more toward the gate, but this time, he did not try to walk alone, and Rex, without hesitation, stepped forward beside him, not behind, not ahead, but exactly where he chose to be. The gate stood open now, just wide enough for one man to walk through without turning his shoulders, its metal frame humming faintly in the morning wind, as if it carried the memory of every exit before this one. Daniel Carter slowed as he reached it, his boots stopping just inches from the threshold where gravel met pavement, that invisible line between what had defined him and what waited beyond it. Rex stopped too, not because he was told, but because he felt the pause, his body aligned beside Daniel, close enough that their shadows blended into one long shape stretching across the ground. Behind them, the training yard remained frozen in its quiet order, 47 German shepherds still seated, still perfect, still waiting for a command that no longer belonged to the man standing at the gate. A senior officer's voice carried across the distance, calmer now, but edged with something harder to name. This is your last chance, Carter. The words did not rush, they settled. Deliberate, like stones placed carefully one after another. Give the order and walk out clean. Daniel did not turn immediately, his eyes fixed ahead on the empty road that ran past the base, a narrow strip of asphalt cutting through dry land and low brush, stretching farther than he could see. There was no promise in that road, no structure, no certainty, just distance, and whatever a man chose to carry with him. Rex shifted slightly, the faint scrape of his paw against the ground breaking the stillness for a fraction of a second. Daniel glanced down at him, really seeing him now, not as a unit, not as a trained asset, but as something else entirely, something that had followed without being asked, something that had chosen without needing to understand the cost. You do not know what is out there, Daniel murmured, his voice low, almost lost to the wind. Rex's ears flicked at the sound, but his posture did not change, steady, grounded, as if the uncertainty ahead meant nothing compared to the certainty of staying. Another memory rose, unbidden but clear, a training day under a hotter sun, when Rex had refused to leave a downed obstacle until Daniel himself stepped forward. No command had been enough then either. It had taken presence, trust, something that went beyond the structure they both lived inside. Daniel exhaled slowly, the weight of years pressing into that single breath. Behind him, the officer spoke again, sharper now. "That dog is not yours anymore." The statement hung in the air, not shouted, not forced, just stated as fact, as rule, as boundary. Daniel's jaw tightened slightly. But he did not argue, because on paper, it was true. On paper, Rex belonged to the system, to the program, to the order that kept 47 others perfectly still. But the paper did not see this moment, did not feel the quiet decision standing beside him. Daniel stepped forward, one foot crossing the threshold, the faint change in texture under his boot marking the transition. Gravel to pavement, past to whatever came next. Rex moved with him instantly, no hesitation, no glance back, just forward, matching the step as if it had always been theirs to take. Together, a sharp whistle cut through the air behind them, instinctive, commanding, the kind of sound that had shaped every response Rex had ever given. For a split second, time seemed to hold its breath. Daniel felt it, that old rhythm, that trained reflex. But Rex did not turn, did not even flinch. He kept walking, steady, unwavering. The whistle faded into nothing, swallowed by the open space beyond the gate. Daniel did not look back this time, not at the officers, not at the line of dogs, not at the place that had defined every rule he had ever followed. Because some choices, once made, do not need witnesses. The road stretched ahead, quiet and uncertain, and beside him, a single set of paws moved in perfect step, not commanded, not expected, just chosen. And in that quiet, something shifted, not loud, not dramatic, but real, the kind of shift that does not announce itself. It simply becomes the truth you carry forward. The sound of the bass faded slowly behind them, not all at once, but in layers, like something letting go one breath at a time. The distant hum of generators softened first, then the faint metallic clatter of training equipment, until all that remained was the quiet rhythm of footsteps on pavement and the low whisper of wind moving across open land. Daniel Carter did not stop walking, but his pace had changed, no longer measured by drills or commands, just steady, human, uncertain in a way he had not allowed himself to feel in years. Rex stayed beside him, close but not pressing, his stride relaxed now, no longer bound by formation, his ears shifting with every new sound beyond the fence line, as if the world had suddenly grown wider. Daniel glanced down at him once, brief, almost instinctive, and in that glance there was something unfamiliar, not control, not responsibility, but awareness, the kind that comes when something is no longer assigned to you, but stays anyway. The road stretched ahead in a long gray line, cutting through dry grass that swayed in the morning breeze. The sun had climbed higher now, warming the air just enough to take the edge off the cold, but not enough to soften the weight in Daniel's chest. He had spent years knowing exactly where to stand, exactly what to do, and now every step forward felt like stepping into a space without edges. Rex slowed slightly, his nose dipping toward the ground, catching a scent that did not belong to training, yards, or routine paths. Daniel stopped this time, not because he had to, but because something in the moment asked for it. He set his duffel down on the side of the road, the fabric brushing against gravel with a soft, final sound. Rex lifted his head, watching him, waiting, but not for instruction. Daniel rubbed the back of his neck, exhaling as he looked out across the open land. "This is as far as you go," he said quietly, the words heavier now, not like before, not like a handler giving direction, but like a man trying to draw a line he was not sure he believed in. Rex did not move, his gaze steady, his body still. Daniel crouched slightly, resting his hands on his knees, bringing himself closer to the dog's level. "You did enough," he continued, his voice softer, almost breaking but held together by habit. "You stayed when you did not have to. That is more than anyone could ask." The wind moved between them, carrying dust and the faint scent of sun-warmed earth. Rex stepped forward then, just one step, closing the small distance Daniel had tried to create, his head lifting slightly as if to meet Daniel's eyes, not pushing, not demanding, just present. Daniel let out a small breath that almost became a laugh, but did not quite make it. He reached out, his hand hovering for a second before resting against Rex's neck, feeling the warmth beneath the thick fur, the steady life there, real and undeniable. "You do not understand," Daniel whispered, but even as he said it, he knew that was not true, because whatever Rex understood, it was enough to bring him here, enough to keep him here. Daniel straightened, slowly, picking up his duffel again, the straps settling across his shoulder like something he had carried for too long. He took a step forward, away from the base, away from everything that had once defined him, then another, and for a moment, just a moment, he did not hear the second set of footsteps. But when he did, it was not a surprise. Rex moved beside him again, quiet, certain, as if the decision had already been made long before the gate, long before the line, long before any command could have stopped it. Daniel did not speak this time, did not try to send him back, because some lines, once crossed, do not exist anymore, and some bonds, once chosen, do not ask permission to stay. The road did not change for miles, just a long stretch of gray cutting through open land that felt too wide, too quiet, like a place that did not ask questions but did not offer answers either. Daniel Carter kept walking, his pace steady but no longer guided by anything familiar. The rhythm now his own, uncertain but real. The sun had risen higher, warming the back of his neck, pulling the chill from the morning air, and still Rex stayed beside him, matching every step without effort, not looking for direction, not waiting for a signal, just present in a way that felt both simple and impossible to ignore. After a while Daniel slowed, his eyes scanning ahead until he spotted a small roadside stop. Nothing more than an old wooden shelter with a bench and a faded sign half worn by weather. It stood about 50 yards off the road, surrounded by dry grass and a few scattered stones, the kind of place people passed without noticing unless they needed a reason to stop. Daniel angled toward it without speaking, his boots crunching softly as he stepped off the pavement. Rex followed without hesitation, his ears flicking at the change in ground, the shift from road to dust. They reached the shelter and Daniel dropped his duffel onto the bench, the wood creaking under the weight. He sat down slowly, elbows resting on his knees, his hands hanging loose as he looked out at nothing in particular. Rex stood for a moment, scanning the area, then settled near Daniel's feet, his body relaxed but alert, as if guarding something invisible. Time stretched in that quiet, not measured in minutes but in breaths. Daniel rubbed his hands together slowly, feeling the grit of dust against his skin, grounding himself in something real. "You are still here," he said after a while, not as a question, not even as a statement, just a recognition of something he had not fully accepted yet. Rex lifted his head slightly at the sound of his voice, his eyes calm, steady, the same look he had carried since stepping across that line. Daniel leaned back against the bench, the wood pressing against his shoulders, and let his gaze drift upward to the open sky. Clear, endless, unfamiliar in its freedom. "They are going to come looking for you," he continued, his tone quiet, thoughtful, "not because they care, but because you belong on paper." He paused, letting the words settle before adding, "And I do not." Rex shifted closer, not enough to touch, but enough to close the space again, as if distance itself was something he refused to allow. Daniel let out a slow breath, his chest rising and falling in a rhythm that had nothing to do with orders or expectation. "You had 47 reasons to stay," he said, his voice softer now. 47 chances to do exactly what you were trained to do." His hand dropped to his side, fingers brushing lightly against Rex's fur without fully resting there. "But you chose the one thing you were never taught." Rex did not react to the words, but there was something in the way he remained, steady, grounded, that answered more clearly than any command ever could. A distant sound carried across the open land then, faint but distinct, the low hum of an engine somewhere back along the road. Daniel's eyes shifted slightly, not alarmed, but aware. He knew that sound, knew what it meant. Routine did not let go easily. Systems did not forget what belonged to them. He straightened a little on the bench, his posture tightening for a brief moment before easing again, the old reflex rising and falling like a tide that no longer held him. Rex's ears turned toward the sound as well, but he did not stand, did not tense. He simply acknowledged it, then returned his focus to Daniel, as if whatever was coming did not matter as much as what was already decided. Daniel watched him for a long second, then nodded once, almost to himself. "All right," he said quietly, Not giving a command, not setting a rule, just accepting something that had already been chosen. He pushed himself up from the bench, lifting the duffel again, the weight no lighter than before, but carried differently now. He stepped back toward the road, pausing for a brief second, as if giving space for a different ending. But when the second set of footsteps followed without hesitation, he did not stop. Again, the engine sound grew slightly louder in the distance, closing in but not yet arriving. And for the first time since leaving the gate, Daniel did not feel like he was being followed or chased or watched. He felt something else entirely, something quieter, steadier, like a path forming not in front of him, but beside him, one step at a time, chosen, not ordered, and that made all the difference. The engine sound behind them grew clearer now, no longer a distant hum, but a steady presence rolling across the open land, tires pressing against pavement with a low rhythm that matched the tightening space between past and present. Daniel Carter did not turn immediately. He kept walking, one step after another, as if the road ahead still held the only answer worth following, but his shoulders shifted. Slightly, aware in the way only years of training could shape, not fear, not resistance, just recognition. Rex stayed beside him, his gait unchanged, calm, grounded, the same quiet certainty that had carried him across the line now carrying him forward without hesitation. The vehicle came into view in the reflection of a small roadside sign, dark, official, moving at a measured pace, not rushing, not forcing, just arriving. Daniel slowed then, not stopping, but allowing the moment to catch up. The wind moved across the land again, carrying dust and the faint scent of warm asphalt. The sky above wide and indifferent, as if none of this mattered beyond the choices being made within it. The vehicle pulled alongside them, engine lowering to a soft idle. The window rolled down with a mechanical hum, and a familiar voice followed, controlled, steady. Carter. No rank, no formality, just the name. As if everything else had already been stripped away, Daniel stopped walking, turning. Slightly now, enough to face the road without fully facing the man inside the vehicle. Rex stopped too, his posture unchanged, alert but not tense, the kind of stillness that comes from knowing rather than waiting. The officer inside rested his arm against the window frame, his expression unreadable at first glance, but there was something beneath it, something quieter than authority. "You know how this works," he said, his tone even, not harsh, not soft, just certain. "That dog does not belong out here." Daniel let the words sit in the air for a moment, not rejecting them, not accepting them, just allowing them to exist. "Neither do I," he replied after a beat, his voice calm, carrying no edge, just truth. The officer's gaze shifted briefly to Rex, studying him, measuring something that could not be written in reports or logged in files. He crossed a line. The officer continued. He failed the test. Daniel's jaw tightened slightly, but his voice did not change. Or maybe he passed. The only one that mattered. The silence that followed was not empty. It held weight, held the kind of pause where something unseen was being considered. The wind moved again, brushing against the side of the vehicle, lifting a faint swirl of dust that caught the sunlight for a moment before settling back into stillness. Rex shifted his weight slightly, stepping forward just enough to align himself beside Daniel again, not in defense, not in challenge, just presence. The officer noticed it, his eyes narrowing slightly, not in anger, but in thought. "You give the word," he said finally, quieter now. "He comes back. No report, no consequence. This ends clean." Daniel looked down at Rex, really looked, not at the uniform he no longer wore, not at the road ahead, but at the dog who had chosen him without command, without reason, without permission. "And if I do not?" he asked, not challenging, just asking. The officer exhaled slowly, his gaze drifting out across the open land for a moment before returning. "Then you both walk," he said. "And nothing out here is written for either of you." The words did not sound like a threat. They sounded like a boundary, like a door left open but not held. Daniel nodded once, slow, understanding settling into place not as fear, but as clarity. He reached down then, his hand resting briefly against Rex's neck, feeling the steady warmth there. "Grounding real, you hear that?" he murmured, not expecting an answer. Rex did not move away, did not look toward the vehicle. He stayed exactly where he was, as if the choice had already been made long before the question was asked. Daniel straightened, his hand falling back to his side, and without another word, he turned forward again, stepping away from the vehicle, away from the base, away from the last chance to make things simple. Rex moved with him instantly. No hesitation, no glance back, just forward. The officer watched them for a long second, then another, before the engine behind them shifted slightly, not following, not stopping, just remaining where it was. And as the distance between them grew, the sound of it faded once more into the open quiet, leaving only the road, the wind, and two shadows moving side by side into something that no longer needed permission to exist. The road narrowed as the sun climbed higher, the heat beginning to rise in soft waves from the pavement, bending the air just enough to blur the distance ahead. Daniel Carter walked without counting steps now, without measuring distance in miles or markers, just moving forward because stopping no longer felt like an option. Rex stayed beside him, his tongue slightly out as the warmth settled into the day, but his pace. Just stating what was true. The woman nodded as if that answer made sense in a way she did not need to question. That is enough these days, she said quietly, ringing up the purchase. Daniel stepped back outside, the heat wrapping around him again. But it felt different now, less sharp, more real. He twisted the cap off the bottle and took a long drink, then crouched slightly, pouring some into his hand and offering it to Rex. The dog leaned in, drinking carefully, not rushed, not desperate, just present. Daniel watched him for a moment, the way he moved, the way he stayed, and something in his chest eased, not fully, but enough. The man by the truck had finished fueling and was now leaning against the side, arms crossed, observing them with a quiet, thoughtful look. He does not look like a stray, the man said after a moment, his tone casual, but his eyes sharp. Daniel straightened, capping the bottle slowly. He is not, he replied. The man nodded once, as if confirming something he already suspected. Dogs like that, he added, glancing at Rex. They do not follow just anyone. Daniel looked down at Rex again, the dog meeting his gaze without hesitation, and for the first time since stepping beyond the gate, Daniel allowed himself to feel the weight of that truth fully, not as a burden, but as something else, something steadier, something chosen. The wind moved lightly across the lot, carrying the faint smell of gasoline and sun-baked earth, and as Daniel picked up his duffel once more, stepping back toward the road, Rex rose beside him without needing a word, without needing a signal, just moving because he had already decided, and this time, Daniel did not question it. He simply walked, and Rex walked with him, and somewhere between the silence they left behind and the unknown stretching ahead, something that had no name began to feel like it might be enough. The afternoon stretched longer than expected, the sun now leaning westward, casting a softer light across the road that had begun to feel less like an escape and more like a path being quietly accepted. Daniel Carter walked with a slower pace now, not from exhaustion alone, but from the subtle shift in something inside him. The urgency that once pushed him forward had softened, replaced by a steady awareness of each step, each breath, each sound that filled the open space around them. Rex remained at his side, his movements just as measured, but there was a change in him too, less alert to commands that would never come, more attuned to the rhythm they now shared. The land around them had begun to change, dry grass giving way to patches of green, a small creek cutting across the terrain ahead, its water catching the sunlight in thin, shimmering lines. Daniel paused when he saw it. The first real break in the monotony of the road. He stepped off the pavement again, boots sinking slightly into softer ground as he approached the edge of the water. Rex moved ahead this time, not far, just enough to lower his head and drink, the sound of it gentle, almost quiet enough to disappear into the breeze. Daniel crouched near the bank, splashing a small amount of water onto his face, the coolness cutting through the weight of the day, grounding him in something immediate and real. He stayed there for a moment longer than necessary, watching the way the water moved, constant, unbothered, flowing without needing direction. "You ever notice," he said quietly, not looking at Rex, "how things just keep going, whether we are ready or not?" Rex lifted his head slightly, droplets falling back into the creek, his ears shifting toward Daniel's voice, but he did not move closer. He stayed where he was, as if giving space for the thought to settle. Daniel leaned back onto his heels, his gaze drifting across the narrow stream. The way it carved its own path without permission, without approval, just moving because that was what it was meant to do. The silence between them was no longer something to carry. It had become something to rest in. A distant rumble of thunder rolled faintly across the horizon, not immediate, not threatening, just a reminder that the sky itself was always in motion, always changing. Daniel stood slowly, brushing dirt from his hands, his body, adjusting to the still unfamiliar freedom of choosing his next step. He glanced at Rex, really looked this time, taking in the details he had once overlooked, the way his coat caught the light, the steadiness in his stance, the quiet intelligence in his eyes. "I spent years telling you where to go, Daniel,"